Winter in the medieval world was not just a season. It was a test of endurance. Imagine stepping out of a timber hut at dawn, the air biting your skin, frost clinging to the thatched roof, and the ground so hard you could hear it crack beneath your boots. For peasants, these conditions lasted not for days, but for months. No central heating, no electric blankets, and no modern insulation stood between them and the bitter cold. Yet despite the odds, families endured, adapted, and even thrived. In this journey, we will step back into that world and explore how medieval people survived winter nights that could be colder inside their huts than outside. Their ingenuity gave rise to methods that were simple, practical, and, amazingly, still useful today. We will move through 5 chapters: fires, beds, lofts, animals, and clothing, each a vital piece of the survival puzzle. At the heart of survival lay the fire. To the medieval peasant, fire was more than warmth. It was life. But not every fire was equal. Rather than building flames high above the floor, many peasants dug their hearths into the ground. These sunken fires were brilliant in design. When placed below floor level, heat didn't just shoot upward and vanish. Instead, it spread sideways first, radiating warmth across the floor before rising. The result was an early form of radiant heating, turning a simple hut into something more livable. The peasants didn't stop there. They lined these hearths with heavy stones, river rocks when possible. Stones absorbed heat during the burn and continued releasing it long after the fire went out. Think of them as medieval heat batteries, keeping toes warm until morning. Placement was crucial. Fires in the center of the room distributed heat equally. A hearth against the wall meant that only one side of the hut stayed warm. By positioning fires at the heart of the space, families shared the heat more evenly, reducing dangerous cold pockets. But medieval ingenuity extended to fire management. They banked their fires at night, covering hot coals with layers of ash. This kept embers alive until morning, reducing the need to spark a fresh blaze in the dark, cold hours. With the right wood, slow-burning hardwoods like oak or beech, those embers could smolder safely for hours, springing back to life with a little kindling at dawn. These systems worked so well that some ideas remain in use today. Modern underfloor heating follows the same principle, warmth rising gently through the living space rather than escaping in one hot column. Yet no fire could save a peasant from the bitter chill of the ground. The earth swallowed warmth quickly, and sleeping directly on it was a recipe for shivering through the night. That is why peasants built their beds like fortresses. At the base was straw, thick layers packed into cloth sacks or spread beneath rushes. Each stalk of straw was hollow, trapping tiny pockets of air that acted as natural insulation. Multiply this by thousands of stalks, and the result was a mattress that held warmth far better than bare ground. But the cleverness did not stop at a single layer. In colder regions, families sometimes built beds in double or even triple layers, with air gaps in between. These acted like insulation sandwiches, holding in body heat for longer stretches of the night. On top of straw came wool or fur. These softer layers stopped precious body warmth from sinking downward. In deep winter, bedding could reach nearly a foot thick. Sliding into one of these beds was like sinking into a warm, lumpy cloud. Scratchy, perhaps, but life-saving. Sealing mattered as much as layering. Rolled cloth around the edges of the bed created barriers against drafts, much like caulking around a window. Even the smallest crack could let cold air steal away hard-earned warmth. And then there was the strategy of sharing. Families often crowded together onto large straw beds, using combined body heat as one more form of insulation. Children were placed between adults, ensuring the most vulnerable stayed warmest. In the end, warmth came not just from clever construction, but from togetherness. Fire and bedding kept peasants alive, but some knew how to take survival to the next level, by building upwards. Hot air always rises, and medieval families took advantage of this. They built lofts, raised sleeping platforms just below the roof. Here, the warmest air in the hut collected, sometimes several degrees higher than the floor. Those few degrees could be the difference between a restful sleep and a frozen night. The construction was straightforward. Wooden planks laid across beams, often recycled from other projects. The lofts had gaps between boards, allowing heat to rise while still supporting the sleepers above. These platforms served more than thermal purposes. They saved precious floor space in tiny huts, making room for cooking, storage, and daily living. Children were often sent to the lofts first, since their smaller bodies lost heat faster, while parents remained below to tend the fire. Lofts also provided a sense of safety. Elevated off the damp ground, families were better protected from drafts, moisture, and even pests. Sleeping aloft meant warmer nights, drier bedding, and more efficient use of the little warmth available. It was, in essence, medieval central heating, capturing the natural flow of hot air and putting it to use. Yet even with fires, beds, and lofts, some nights grew so bitter that humans needed extra help. That help came with 4 legs, feathers, and fur. In harsh winters, families often brought livestock inside their homes. Chickens, goats, pigs, even cows were welcomed indoors, not for comfort, but for survival. Animals radiated steady body heat, raising the temperature of a hut by several degrees. Pigs were particularly valuable. Their size and warmth made them like natural furnaces. Chickens worked best in groups, clustering together and producing surprising heat for their size. Goats and sheep added both warmth and food security, giving milk while keeping huts livable. This arrangement required careful management. Animals were usually penned off from human sleeping areas with simple barriers: wooden rails, woven hurdles, or cloth partitions. This kept hygiene under control while still allowing warmth to circulate. For peasants, the smell of livestock was a small price to pay for life-saving heat. And in fact, the animals benefited too, receiving shelter from predators and frost in exchange for their warmth. It was a relationship of survival, forged in the cold. Finally, survival hinged on clothing, the last barrier between fragile skin and brutal winter air. Peasants layered wool, linen, and fur strategically. Wool was the most important. It trapped heat even when damp, making it far superior to plant fibers. Linen undergarments kept sweat away from the body, while outer layers of wool sealed in warmth. But it was the smaller details that mattered most. Nightcaps were essential. Modern science agrees that the head loses heat rapidly, and peasants knew this through experience. A simple woolen cap could mean the difference between shivering and sleeping soundly. Hands and feet also required protection. Mittens, often just cloth wraps or crude knitwear, prevented fingers from becoming icy radiators that drained warmth from the body. Thick wool socks or wrapped cloths served the same purpose for feet. Even breathing was addressed. Some peasants covered their mouths and noses with cloth strips while sleeping, recycling their own exhaled warmth to preheat the cold air they inhaled. This primitive but effective technique acted like a natural heat exchanger. Together, these garments formed a kind of thermal armor. Not fashionable, perhaps. But when the wind howled through timber walls, fashion was the last concern. Survival came first. When we imagine medieval winters, it is easy to picture suffering and misery. And indeed, life was hard. But peasants were not helpless victims of the cold. They observed, experimented, and passed down knowledge through generations. They built fires that warmed whole floors, beds that trapped body heat, lofts that captured rising warmth, and partnerships with animals that turned barns into heating systems. They wrapped themselves in wool and cloth until their bodies became furnaces of their own. Each of these tricks was simple. Each came from necessity. And remarkably, many of them still make sense today. Radiant heating, layered insulation, shared warmth, and smart airflow management are principles that continue to guide survival and comfort in the modern world. So the next time winter winds rattle your windows, remember the peasants who faced far worse, with nothing but straw, stone, and firelight, and still found ways to endure. Their ingenuity reminds us that survival is not about comfort. It is about adaptation. And sometimes the simplest solutions are the most enduring.